World War One was not just fought on the battlefields, it reshaped industries, economies, and global power. It marked a turning point for the United States as it changed from being a debtor nation to an economic powerhouse. So, how did this global conflict um, fuel an economic boom that would redefine America's role in the world? Well, today we're going to be answering that very question. When World War One erupted in Europe in the summer of 1914. Concerns arose that Europe's falling markets would destabilize the US economy. These fears led to the unprecedented closure of the New York Stock Exchange for 4 months, the longest shutdown in US history. No other period in US history has resulted in a stock exchange closure lasting for more than 10 days. So, why was this extreme measure necessary? Well, in essence, Europe was expected to immediately demand repayment of debts from US financial institutions. And at the time, the New York Stock Exchange served as the primary gateway for massive capital outflows. So shutting it down allowed time to stabilize the financial system, preventing economic collapse. This strategic move helped the US transition from being a debtor nation to a creditor nation as European demand for American goods surged throughout the war. The financial system may have stabilized, but the real economic transformation was just beginning. World War One wasn't just a war of soldiers, it was a war of industry, a war of machines, a war of production. At first, the United States stayed on the sidelines, watching as Europe tore itself apart. But war is expensive, and the Allied powers, France, Britain, and Russia, needed massive amounts of supplies. The United States became their lifeline. Weapons, steel, food, and ammunition flowed across the Atlantic in staggering quantities. Between 1913 and 1917, US exports more than doubled from $2.4 billion to $6.2 billion. This wasn't just a boost for manufacturers, it reshaped the American economy. New factories sprang up, businesses expanded, and industries that had once served domestic needs shifted towards war production. This period also saw the rise of powerful government-business partnerships. The War Industries Board, led by Bernard Baruch, essentially planned the economy, allocating raw materials, setting production quotas, and even controlling prices. While this kind of government control was temporary, it set a precedent for how the United States would handle future large-scale conflicts. Then, in April of 1917, the United States entered the war. Suddenly, war wasn't just fueling business, it was an all-consuming national effort. Factories became the new battlefront. Industrial production skyrocketed. The United States churned out 3.5 million rifles, 20 million artillery rounds, and over 21,000 airplane engines. The war effort swallowed the labor market as men shipped off to fight. Over 1 million women entered the workforce, many for the first time. Wages doubled as well, from $11 per week in 1914 to $22 per week in 1919, fueling consumer spending and economic growth. Technology played a key role in reshaping the economy as well. The demand for cars, airplanes, and radio communications skyrocketed, pushing American industries towards mass production techniques that would define the 20th century. Henry Ford's assembly line methods were adapted for war production, forever changing manufacturing. But war isn't cheap. The United States spent a staggering $32 billion, a massive sum for the time. So how did they pay for it? Well, 22% came from taxes, higher rates on corporations and the wealthy. Then 20% came from new money creation. And finally, 58% came from Liberty bonds. Liberty bonds were a game changer because for the first time the government turned to ordinary citizens to help finance a war. Americans were encouraged to buy bonds as a patriotic duty, and they responded in droves. The idea of war bonds would later be revived during World War II, proving that this financial strategy had long-term staying power. The war didn't just impact the economy, though. It reshaped American society as well. Women entered the workforce in record numbers, proving they could handle jobs traditionally held by men. This shift played a crucial role in the later fight for women's rights and the push for suffrage. African Americans moved north in what became known as the Great Migration, seeking jobs in wartime factories and escaping the racial violence of the South. This reshaped cities like Chicago, Detroit, and New York, permanently altering the demographic landscape. Labor unions also gained power, as the government encouraged higher wages and better working conditions to prevent strikes that could slow down production. When the war ended in 1918, the economy slowed, and returning soldiers faced a job market that had dramatically changed. The United States went through a brief post-war recession from 1918 to 1919 as war production wound down and businesses adjusted to peacetime demand. But the long-term impact of World War One is undeniable. The United States had proven it could finance and fight a global war. It had emerged as a leading industrial power, no longer just a supplier, but a global force. The war had transformed the workforce, accelerating women's employment and wage growth, and most importantly, the economic momentum of the war set the stage for the Roaring Twenties. The United States had just experienced its first taste of a full-scale war economy, and the lessons learned about mass production, industrial planning, and government-business collaboration would be crucial in shaping the American superpower of the 20th century. Well, thank you for watching, and please subscribe.